What's up, Internet? You're tuned to episode 116 of the Steam Deck Podcast, Flip Screen Games' weekly gaming podcast, all about Valve's portable PC powerhouse, the Steam Deck. I'm your host, Peter Messi, joined today by my very good friends and co-hosts, Mr. Stephen Radford.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. Sorry, I forgot what show this was for a second.
Full steam ahead, boys. We have a fun one for us today because, of course, we took a couple weeks off for the holiday, and there have just been a ton of really fun Steam Deck-oriented stories that have gone on the last couple of weeks that we're going to play a little bit of catch-up on here. And we're going to kick things off with the story we've been waiting for, right? Is 2025 finally the year of SteamOS? It seems that way because we got the Legion Go S, the first officially licensed third-party handheld PC powered by SteamOS. I mean, this is what we've been waiting for, right, boys?
Yeah, seems like it. Yeah, we're finally going to get SteamOS out in the wild, which is nice to see.
This is not the way I was hoping. I was hoping for this. I was hoping for the expansion of SteamOS, but I was hoping that it wasn't SteamOS in another handheld. I was hoping it'd be SteamOS in a box, so we could finally have those sort of Steam Machine stars back. I've got friends who are desperate for something he can play Steam games on that isn't a handheld, so he can just have it under his TV, and that currently doesn't exist. So,
you know, he can plug a Steam Deck into the TV.
He can.
I wonder if part of it is because the TV experience is a bit crap at the moment, so they'll do that later. But they have announced alongside the Legion Go, they announced in a blog post over on Valve's website that in addition to the work that they're doing on the Lenovo Legion Go, that they are also going to be shipping a beta of SteamOS, which will improve the experience on other handhelds, and users can download and test this themselves. So ahead of the launch in May, which is when we're expecting the SteamOS version of the Lenovo Legion Go S to ship, you will be able to download SteamOS from Valve's website and install it on whatever device you want. It's a bit strange to me that the Lenovo was the first device that got this, because we know that they were working with Asus to bring it to the ROG Ally. And obviously they decided, we're going to partner with someone else and we're going to put the work in there, because there's two models of the Go S. One comes in white. It comes with Windows 11. You can get that now. It starts at £600. I think it's $600. And then the black version, which is coming in May, is the SteamOS version. You're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that. I don't think they've confirmed the pricing on it, but my guess is it's going to be the exact same pricing.
Which is annoying, considering you think you'd be making a saving on that Windows license, really, wouldn't you? But they're just pocketing that, really, aren't they?
We don't know if they've got to pay a license fee to Valve. Presumably they do, because this is the first powered by SteamOS device. It does have the Steam logo on the device. There's a Steam button on there, similar to the Steam Deck that has the Steam button, and it boots straight into Steam. So there's probably some kind of fee that they're paying to Valve for SteamOS, but we don't know what that is. Obviously, they've not disclosed that. And presumably, you'll just be able to install this on whatever device you want moving forward. So even if the handheld that you've bought, it hasn't licensed it, say you bought an original Lenovo Legion Go, you'll be able to install SteamOS on there when it goes into beta, probably in April.
I would love to give this a go. I've got lots of little mini PCs at work that we've sort of had, ready for recycling, but I would love to test using one of those, like pop SteamOS on that, see if we can run EmuDeck on it, make a little emulation machine, and sort of see how that goes, because that would be, the applications of that are amazing. Imagine, how people buy those Fire Sticks that they plug into the TV and it's got all the apps and all the movies and stuff on it. Imagine one of those for games, where you can get a SteamOS powered emulation machine that's not as illegal as those things, but it's also not one of those super duper cheap. This has got 5,000 games in it. Yeah, like 50 of the games are the same game.
I feel like this presents a nice, slightly more high tech alternative to something like a Raspberry Pi. And I say high tech, that is maybe not the right turn of phrase. Maybe I mean more plug and play, because it's if you can just get one of those tiny build, PCs that are roughly the size of a set-top box, or the actual physical Apple TV device, something like that, right, where it's a similar footprint to that, something that you can kind of tuck on your entertainment system, and you could just install EmuDeck on it. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's the exact same kind of functionality that you would have gotten out of a Raspberry Pi, but with a lot less steps, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is what EmuDeck wanted to make themselves, didn't they? There just didn't seem to be enough interest in that whole package. But if you can do it yourself, I think that's probably more attractive, especially when you can dual boot into things as well. Like, I'm tempted to plug an SSD into my PC, for example, and give a quick go on, you know, how powerful can you take this? If I can take my PC hardware and have a Steam Deck that's the power of my PC, would that work? I know right now you can actually.
There should be no reason why you couldn't. So Bazite is like a flavor of Linux that kind of apes SteamOS. We've seen a lot about it. There was talk that, is this going to be the end for Bazite? But one of the project owners that posted over on Reddit that they're not going anywhere, and they want to kind of focus on not just being for handhelds, because Valve has specifically said that SteamOS you can run on other handhelds. We don't know that you can't run it on other PCs, but they've said that they've built this operating system to provide a seamless user experience optimized for gaming while retaining access to the power and flexibility of a PC. So I don't see why you couldn't just run it on whatever you wanted, as long as there's drivers that go with it that are available for Linux anyway.
Yeah,
which I think most GPUs and CPUs there should be.
So I think right now, if you can actually, if you get the recovery image for SteamOS, you can flash it to a hard drive and have it in a PC, but it has to be AMD. It has to be like the specific sort of not exactly the same as the Steam Deck setup, but it has to be similar. AMD. And it's things don't work where it's sort of you go in and it's expecting a screen, it's expecting buttons, it's expecting things that aren't there, and you go through this setup process, as if you've got as if it's a handheld machine. But then once you're in there, it does work. It would be nice if it wasn't so strict and you could just, I happen to have this PC. Like if I've just cobbled together these parts from old builds or whatever, I'm going to build myself a little mini Steam machine. And if it's scalable like that, that would be great.
Granted, I'm sure that like long term, that's the goal, right? Is like to because that's at least how we've interpreted what they've said, right? Is that like the goal is eventually to get SteamOS to be just a general launcher that you could run on any device. But I think even if it's not their day and date, what you're describing to me sounds like a perfect opportunity for something like a Bazite to kind of step in and create a compatibility layer of like, you can, use this, whatever. I don't know what you would call Bazite in terms of like a branch.
It's a distro of Linux.
A distro. So like you could basically create a distro of SteamOS that just like flags all the stuff you'd have to do manually, right? Where it's like, where's the screen? Oh, like, and it like provides some kind of false flag. It's like the same way that you would like, it's like the way the emulators work, right? Where it's like, it's running on this device. Got it. Great. Right. And it's like, that's kind of all, I mean, granted, Steve, tell me if I'm wrong. To me, that sounds pretty doable, right? Like if you can already do it and the only things you need to do are kind of circumnavigate the like pieces of hardware that it's looking for that are not there. Yeah. Why couldn't you just create a compatibility layer that just automatically turns all those things off and just lets you run it in desktop mode?
So I assume the reason why the reason why it has to be that this certain stuff right now is because the Steam OS sort of recovery image is specifically looking for the Steam Deck, whereas if SteamOS had a more wider release and you could put it on other handhelds and things like that, I think a lot of that stuff would be taken away. But right now, it specifically is a Steam Deck recovery image, so it's specifically like, this is this AMD thing, this is this AMD CPU and GPU, it should look like this, it has exactly this. Whereas I think much like Windows, which you can just run on anything. And it as long as the drivers exist, like Steve said, hopefully it'll be more like that. And
I think it should be like we should have an installer that will allow you to download it. They could go the route though where, because they've said that they want to improve the experience on other handhelds and users can download and test this themselves. They could go down the route of, we've got say 5 handheld PCs that we've tested this with. You can pick which one you want and download the installer that's specific to that. So it could be that they're just like, you've got an ROG Ally, you can run it on that. You've got a Lenovo Legion Go, you can run it on that. And they then eventually open it up to a wider release. But my guess would be that they'll have an installer and you install it onto like a USB stick and plug that into the device. and that then connects to Wi-Fi or whatever it may need in order to find the drivers, because SteamOS is built on top of another distro of Linux called Arch Linux. So it's already got that stable foundation. Arch Linux has a ton of drivers and support. So most of the kind of latest and greatest cards should be supported. The AMD side is usually very well supported on the Linux side. NVIDIA is usually a little bit late to the game, but I think even the 40 series chips are supported. Obviously, the 50 series chips have just been announced, but they probably will also be supported moving forward. So I would expect to see at the end of this year a kind of general release, whether they still call it a beta or whether they are like, right, we're finally going to say this is, SteamOS version 4, and we're releasing this, and you can install it on whatever you want. That's got to be their end goal. They've wanted to reduce their reliance on Windows for years, for like a decade at this point. That was the original goal of the Steam machines and the original goal of the initial version of SteamOS. And you can see that when you go and search for SteamOS now, you can install the old version that is like 5 years out of date and no one's using, but it's still there, and that allowed you to install it on any device as well. So I think that's got to be where they're trying to kind of lead to.
They've been pushing for Linux for a while, but Proton is specifically there, like, oh, people want to use Linux for gaming, they want to be free of Windows, but the games don't work. We can fix that. It's in our best interest to fix that, so they did, and Proton's fantastic. So. Also, is Proton getting better? Sorry, I'm just doing
it is, yeah.
They recently. What did they do in the last update? Isn't it now that when you make a Proton compatible, when you sort of set Proton as a compatibility layer, usually it makes a folder that's impossible to find. Whereas now I think it splits the files into different places. Am I right? So it's not, you don't delete your compatibility and lose everything inside of it. Is that right?
So I think it put all of the games into like a single folder that was like, if you wanted to delete like those settings, it got rid of it for every single game, whereas now they're on like a per game basis containerized. But even beyond that, like we saw and we spoke about at the end of last year, some of the stuff where it was found on SteamDB where they were experimenting with like running this on ARM chips and things. That could be that something that, we thought maybe they're leading towards like that being for the decade, but it could be that it was because they want to run SteamOS on ARM devices. And there's a ton of those like little mini ARM PCs, like the new Retroid 5, I think it is, runs on ARM. You could potentially install SteamOS on that, run EmuDeck, but you could also then run not only old classic games, but some of the newer, more modern games, like something simple like Stardew Valley or Vampire Survivors, that would run on those like little ARM powered PCs. It just opens up a little bit more to you as a user if you install SteamOS and you have access to the entire Steam library.
And we do love that Steam library.
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of like possibilities here, which I think is good. But I think one question that kind of sprung to mind for me, and I think it's something that Valve must be kind of thinking. It must be in the kind of the back of their head. Like, does the Steam Deck become less relevant as SteamOS is available for wider release? Like, the Lenovo Legion Go S uses the next generation chip, but it's basically the same generation chip as the Z1. It's the Z2 Go, but AMD have announced the Ryzen Z2 chips. We're about to see a bit of a performance bump on all of the handhelds that are coming out this year. Why would I go for a Steam Deck if one of those is available and I can install SteamOS on it?
I feel like the Steam Deck has that value proposition for me. I think it is cheaper than the competition. It has features like the touchpads and all these things that we like about the Steam Deck. It's not necessarily SteamOS that we like the most, but that's a large part of it. But it also has all the other features around it that make it better than Windows to use. And I think even if you put SteamOS on these other consoles, you still don't have full touchpad. You still don't have all the things that we like about SteamOS.
Well, the Lenovo Legion Go does. It has the touchpads, and it has like you can break them off, and you can do all of that stuff with it.
That is true.
So I think, I don't know. I'm kind of two minds, because like I think my knee-jerk reaction is no, And I think it comes back to the conversation that Max and I had with Bob Wolf back on episode 71, I believe is the right number.
Encyclopedic knowledge. Well done.
Sometimes you remember stuff, you know? And, you know, I think the kind of like, to boil down the takeaway from that conversation, right, is that this idea that like the advantage that you always have with the Steam Deck is just that it is the proprietary Valve device, and that like it has a level of like consistent support, and like, you know, any feature that they want to like build out on SteamOS is going to be built with the Steam Deck in mind first, right? So it's like any of these other devices, like they might be great, and I think that they're just in the same way now that there are people that prefer them and use them instead. Like that's all well and good. But you do kind of wonder like how, I don't know, because like when you have all these companies where all they do is make hardware, right? It's like, what is the incentive for them to make one unit and then have a dedicated like generation, I guess, essentially, right? Where they're constantly supporting it, and where, you know, you have this kind of like continuous relationship with one device, which is like, that's the point of these handheld PCs, is like they're supposed to be that kind of console PC hybrid. And like, I think when you get into the like, well, you know, you could buy like, you know, one of these other models that have these other features, or like they have more under the hood, and it's like, then you start getting into that question of like, why wouldn't you just build a PC? And it's not to say that there isn't somebody that exists as a use case for those devices. I just don't think that the value proposition that any one of those devices offers is enough to justify the caveats that come with it. Not having that dedicated support from Valve, not knowing that there's pretty much always going to be a slightly better model right around the corner. Like all of those things don't change just because it uses SteamOS. So like,
it gets rid of the biggest bottleneck though for I think a lot of people, which was like, oh, I really like the ROG Ally. It's, you know, it has some things in its favor that the Steam Deck doesn't have. Like I'm thinking like the VRR display, so I don't have to worry about like setting the specific frame rate. It's like got a little bit more power there.
And I guess that's the thing though, right? Is like if you're Valve, right? Like, yeah, you're thinking about how this impacts Steam Deck, but ultimately it's like, do you even care? Because it's like, if you're somebody who's like, well, I'm running SteamOS on my ROG Ally and I'm buying all my games on Steam, then it's like, well, it's a Steam Deck then. But, you know, as far as they're concerned, it's like, we don't know what the profit margin is on each individual Steam Deck. That's just not.
I'd imagine it's pretty slim.
Right? Like there isn't a profit margin. They might sell it at a loss, because that's generally how you sell hardware, right? Like you sell it at a slight loss and you make it back in software sales.
30% of every game that you sell, that's not your own. You're just making back. Like you said earlier, there isn't that for the other consoles. Their incentive is they sell you a system, then after a year they're like, well, we need to have another system, because otherwise we're not gonna, you know, how do we do that?
I mean, that's evident from the new Legion Go S. You know, there's two SKUs, and the only difference between the two of them is you get more RAM, and it starts at £600, goes up to £650. So that's astronomically more expensive than the Steam Deck's offering. So I do think that's like, definitely in Valve's favor.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're talking about like the level of minutia of difference between them, I don't know. Like I don't see that being. The Steam Deck is already not a mass market product, so an even more niche version that has worse marketing, right? And I'm not talking shit about any of these devices or the companies that make them, but it's just the reality that if you play PC games, you probably play them on Steam, which means you're at least aware of the Steam Deck, because there's an ad for it on the front page of Steam every day, right? And it's like the idea that you, as somebody who's already in the Steam ecosystem, would make the jump and pick up a Steam Deck over one of these other devices that you're less likely to know about. There are multiple models that you need to do research on. It's just like it has all of the complications of buying a PC without the same like one-to-one benefit, right? Where it's like that's always the trade-off. Is like, yeah, like you do have to do some work to build a PC. You do have to build the PC. Like, you know, there's a level of research and investment that goes into getting your rig set up, but you're kind of rewarded for that investment by getting higher power, better output, you know, all those things. These devices are supposed to be plug and play. And like, I think if you're getting into the minutia of like, oh, well, I'm going to get this because it like this category of game I want to play can hit 60 FPS with it, and it has more, and it's like, I just don't, I don't know.
I think that's the PC player though. I really do. Like I think that is the PC player.
But if that same person is that nickel and dimey about like frame rate or whatever, then they're probably not playing on the Steam Deck at all. Right?
I think
we have people that have
like,
commented on this podcast being like, the Steam Deck is always going to be underpowered. It's always going to be inferior to a PC. It's not real PC gaming. And it's like,
I think some people think like that, but I do think a large market is people that play on their PC and they just want to take those games on the go. And if I can take the game that I'm playing, like say it's a slightly larger game, maybe it's something like Starfield that didn't run very well on the Steam Deck, or like say like the Indiana Jones game or whatever, and I want to play that. It doesn't run on the Steam Deck, but it does run on the ROG Ally. I can take those games with me. It opens up a few more that I can potentially play.
But like you said, it's a bigger investment, and like
it is a bigger investment. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem in my mind. It's like, again, it's like if you're really somebody that like super cares about those things and you want a mobile option, wouldn't you just buy like a gaming laptop then? Or so, like, wouldn't you go, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, if you're gonna go that extra mile to get something that's like that much more powerful, I don't know. It feels like it exists in like a weird middle ground where it's like a premium version of a casual device. And it feels similar to like the critique that a lot of people had about like the price point of like the PlayStation 5 Pro, where it's like, for $800, why wouldn't you just build a PC? It's like, for this much money, why wouldn't you just get a device that's more powerful, right? Rather than like a marginal increase versus the Steam Deck, which is something that like has all those other advantages that we talked about. I don't know. And maybe I'm wrong, right? Like maybe I'm misreading the tea leaves and like this will be the differentiator and that it is only that Windows handheld is bad that makes these devices like unattractive. But I don't know. I can't imagine like a mass exodus of Steam Deck users, and I don't think that these devices running SteamOS is going to bring in a new wave of players that wouldn't have bought a device otherwise, and that's where I'm kind of stuck on it.
So I think it's fair to say that the three of us are fairly tuned into this, right? We know the different devices. We know the Legion Go. We know the Ally, whatever it's called, the Ally X. We know the MSI Claw. We know the Steam. We know all of the devices and the sort of surrounding ones and blah, 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 right? But even us, see it as the Steam Deck and everything else. Is that fair to say?
I think that's, that's how I feel about it. We're biased.
It reminds me so much of the mobile market. It's like the iPhone and everything else. And on those everything else's, it's like Google is making Android and they're making new features for Android that works on their phone, and then they roll it out to everyone else. Yeah, then Samsung gets it.
I see what you're saying, but I think the issue there is that everyone owns a smartphone and not everybody owns a handheld PC, and the like Apple equivalent in this version is the more affordable option.
Or is the Switch.
Sure, right. That's the even more bait. But like, if you were like, I'm someone who's like a novice to this stuff and I don't know anything about it, but I want to get in the Steam ecosystem. I heard that these handheld PCs are cool. I don't know. I don't know how you get to, I would rather get one of these other devices than the Steam Deck. Because it's I just think it's so much simpler, the marketing of it. There's minutia, but it's like, it's so much less complicated than some of the comparison charts we've looked at from some of these other devices, like from, not Asus, the other one that we talked about with Bob. Ioneo.
The MS.
Right.
Ioneo.
Like 50 different it's like there's like
and every year they've forgotten about the next one, and
yes, there's a level of like literacy that's required for you to like get what you're getting. Whereas like with the deck, it's like it has that. It's the promise of it, whether or not that it always works, is supposed to be that it demystifies things a little bit, right? You buy this one device from Valve, All you have to pick is, do you want the LCD or the OLED, and then like what storage option, right? That's all. Very simple decision to make. And then ostensibly, you already own some Steam games, right? Or if you don't, you're in it for the first time. And anything that you might want to play has a little badge that tells you it runs on the Steam Deck. That's also a thing that won't work on these other devices, right? Because it's like, it's just too many.
No, that will actually work.
Really?
So they've said that the Steam Verified program is extending to be SteamOS Verified.
Oh.
Clever.
That's interesting. Okay. Because I think that's the kind of thing that does make a difference. And if a lot of those features are going to be supported on these other devices, maybe, but I don't know. I still think it's like the Android thing I think that's the most apt comparison. And the reason that Androids were successful is because they were cheaper and they had like, more open functionality. These devices largely are more expensive and they have more features, but it's like, how much mileage are you getting out of the fact that you can disconnect the controllers off of the MSI, right? Like, it's like, how much value are you getting out of the fact that this thing has, 30% more capability than the Steam Deck? I just, it's like for $200 more for, it's like, I just don't know. Like, is there enough of this already niche market that is like, I am willing to spend $200 to $300 more for something that has more bells and whistles? Maybe.
I think there are some people, right, and I don't think that it's necessarily going to be mass market, but I could see everyone else becoming the same size as the Steam Deck, which is why I kind of compare it to the iPhone and everyone else. The iPhone is like 50% of the market, then everyone else is the other 50%.
Everyone else is imitating them.
Exactly. So it feels like the Steam Deck's going to be the iPhone. They were there first. They kind of carved out this market.
They created the form factor, right? Like as it stands, right? Like every other device on the market is aping that now.
Yeah, pretty much. Like we even see them trying to put like trackpads and things on. I want to go back to the SteamOS Verified thing though, because it is quite interesting. They said that in the FAQs on the blog post, can this run every game on Steam? They said it runs the vast majority of the Steam library thanks to the Proton compatibility layer that Valve ships. When a game doesn't run well on SteamOS,
like not compatibility of the OS, but I mean like part of verification is that it runs on Steam Deck.
I don't think power has ever really been. We've seen games that they're like, oh yeah, this is verified because the text is readable, it actually boots up, the controls work, it shows the correct buttons. But whether that game, how that game runs, doesn't really come into it. Like games that are verified that run like a shaky 30. Oh yeah, if you turn the settings down low enough, you can get a shaky 30 out of it. But you can read the text and the buttons work, so it's verified.
Right. That's true.
Which is why I think it's a flawed system personally. But
we've done 2 or 3 episodes about how it's never been a particularly good system.
Have.
So yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. I guess.
Go on.
No. Go ahead, Max.
I was going to say, I should have wrote this thought down now. There are people that are. So I talk a lot about the Steam Deck. I've said to my mates, buy Steam Decks. This is great. Buy Steam Decks. And those that have bought Steam Decks have loved them. People that haven't bought Steam Decks and have opted for the Legion Go or the ROG Ally have done it for one reason and one reason alone. And it's not Windows. It's not anti-cheat. It's
really,
I could go to Argos today and pick this up.
You know what? That is a big part of it, I think. Like, I can walk into Best Buy and I see the ROG Ally on display and I'm like, oh, you know what? That's really cool. And this is an impulse.
That's utterly bizarre to me. And like, I'm not, maybe that's a thing. Maybe it's just anecdotal, but it's utterly bizarre to me that someone in 2025 is like, I would buy it if I could go to a store and touch it. It's like,
that's it. I don't have to wait.
What universe do you live in? How do you buy things? I can't tell you the last time I went to a store to buy a piece of technology.
No, but if I bought a Steam Deck now, I would have to wait 7-8 days for it to arrive at my house. Whereas if I got in the car right now and I drove to a Sainsbury's, and go into an Argos inside Sainsbury's, like the Russian doll that is now, I could walk out with a Legion Go or an ROG Ally.
Fair enough. I'm not trying to throw shade at your friends. That's some head ass logic. If I have to wait 7 days, if you had ordered it the first time you thought about it, you'd have had it months ago.
I agree, and and there have been times where they've gone, because of this, I don't like the Windows on it, blah 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 blah, and they'll convince themselves that they do enjoy it. But it's never been to do with the OS that's running on it. It's never been to do with the fact that this is Steam. It's not even to do with price necessarily. It's just I can get this now I don't have to wait a week. I don't have to order through Steam. Or it could even be a case of like, oh, I've got vouchers that can go towards this at Curry's, so I can do that. Or
I do think that goes somewhat like, people trading things in at GameStop. You can pick up the Legion Go S instead. Like that probably does factor into it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is really going to affect the Steam Deck. I don't think that's going anywhere. And I do think it's only a boon for Valve. They're going to basically own this whole market because
I think it's overall a win-win. It's a win for these other devices because it makes them more attractive, and it's a win for Valve because no matter which one of these you buy, you're buying Steam games. They don't give a shit. And I think you're right. I don't think it's enough to move the needle. I think it makes these devices cooler. I think it, the types of users that you talked about who might want one, great. It's more attractive for them, but like I don't think this is gonna put Steam Deck in a position where they're like worried that they're not going to be number one anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone is saying like, oh, I don't want a Steam Deck, 'cause it's a little bit underpowered and I really want to play this game, at least now I've got an option to push them towards. I can say, go pick up the Ally Go S. It's a great device. It looks really nice. It's tidy, and it runs
SteamOS. The Ally Go S. Oh, right. Sorry. Legion. Right.
Legion Go S. Sorry.
I mean,
I thought there was another SKU that I'd missed. I was like, fucking hell.
It's yet a third device.
Yeah, the Ally Go S Z2 Extreme or something.
Hopefully the ultimate takeaway here is just that there being other devices on the market that are attractive is just it's an incentive for Valve to, when the next iteration comes, to be like, okay, we're not the only game in town, right? So let's make sure that it hits a certain benchmark. Let's make sure we have some attractive new features, all that kind of stuff. Competition is a good thing, right? Breeds excellence. That's what they say.
I think it's also going to spur Microsoft on a little bit as well. They can see themselves kind of potentially losing this market.
Yeah, if we don't get an Xbox or Microsoft handheld to market now, that we're going to lose more and more ground.
Exactly. Phil Spencer's been talking about an Xbox handheld for months, but at CES there was a little bit of a kind of talk about this. Where they were saying that they do need to bring the Xbox experience to Windows, whatever that means. But I don't think that's what people want. I really kind of feel like what people want is the Steam experience, and funneling people into the shitty Xbox app that nobody uses, nobody wants, and it just clogs up their PC to buy games on the Windows Store. It's just not what people want. And I really think that Microsoft needs to connect with the audience. They need to realize that people want Steam. They want that front and center on their device. And you've got to figure out a way to bring that to them, or you risk losing this market forever.
I just don't think they can do that. I don't think there's any universe where they do that. I was wrong about the PlayStation thing. Fine. I don't think there's any universe where Microsoft invites Steam onto their platform, because then they just don't sell games anymore. Why would you ever buy a game from Windows or from the
I don't know why anyone would ever buy a game from Windows anyway, because they sell all their games on Steam. It's a absolute quandary for me.
And I think that's the thing is, if there is a universe where they create a handheld device and they do continue to lean into the you can stream the games that you own anywhere, then that would be why you would buy them, right? Because it's if I buy them in the Xbox ecosystem, I can play them at home on my console, on the go on my handheld, or on my PC. I can play them anywhere, right? And right now, unless Steam does create kind of that third pillar, right, of I think
it won't necessarily be Steam that creates it, but I could easily see Ionia going, you know what, let's make a little box and we'll put SteamOS on it, and you can shove it under your TV.
Sure. And I think until there is an option like that, that would be something that would, again, is that enough to move the needle? I think that's a different question, but it is a value proposition, right? Then you could be like, oh, as an Xbox player, that is the benefit I get by buying whatever third-party game I want to play there, right? It's I have a great rig at home. I can play absolute max settings on my home PC. If I want the convenience of playing on my television, I can do that. If I want to take it on the go, I can take it on the go, and I can stream it so it actually looks and runs even better, right? Ideally, right? You get to a point where hopefully that's the level of quality that they're able to achieve with those, right? Any game I have in my Xbox library, I can stream to any device 60 FPS because all the computing's going on somewhere
You know
else.
what? I did a lot of that over the Christmas break. I was at my parents' for a week, and I was streaming Indiana Jones from the cloud straight to my Steam Deck. Absolutely flawless. It's come up on leaps and bounds since I tried streaming last. No idea what GeForce Now is going to be like, but they announced at CES as well that they're bringing a native GeForce Now app to the Steam Deck, which is going to bring up to 4K resolution, which is irrelevant considering the screen's 900p.
Can't even achieve 4K. Yeah, it's like great.
It's like cool. 60 FPS with HDR, which will be an absolute game changer. We've not seen HDR on streaming to the Steam Deck on any kind of platform. I think maybe you can do it with Chiaki NG from your actual PlayStation, but not from the cloud. Have either of you tried GeForce Now? I know my dad really loves GeForce Now. He says it's like the best streaming service he's tried.
I haven't used it.
I've always wanted to give it a go. However, because I'm generally trying to play at home, I just stream it straight. Because you have to loan the game, right? Am I right? You
own the game. So essentially, the way GeForce Now works is you log in and you get it's your Steam games that you can stream on a computer in the cloud that you're renting, that will be running the latest generation NVIDIA chips. So like the 5090 will go up there, and you can then experience like ray tracing and all the bells and whistles that kind of comes with that. But you do have to own the game. Like you've had to have that in your Steam library to be able to play.
Yeah. So I've not really had a need for that. However, I will say it's crazy looking at this website right now that the ultimate tier, the sort of, the 4K RTX, 240 hertz, blah, 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 FPS, all that stuff, is the only one that isn't sold out. I don't necessarily know how a membership can be sold out, but if you wanted to try get
There's
the
probably
free
a finite
one,
number of,
machines.
Yeah, machines.
Yeah,
that
but if
can
I
do
go
the
on
work,
to
right?
if I go on to 6-month plans, performance becomes available. 1-month plan, there's no performance, like middle tier.
I mean, you're welcome to pay $59.99 or $49.99 up front. If you want to do that, I'm sure they'll take your money and you just join the 6-hour queue.
Yeah, it's not a system I'm that jazzed by. I love the idea of it. It personally doesn't fit in with me, but I know there are people who don't own PCs who have the Steam Deck who just recently, my friend Ben was like, I wanted to play No Rest for the Wicked and Hyper Light Breaker in early access. The Steam Deck doesn't run them very well, so I'll have to wait on that. And I thought, well, if you were to have GeForce Now, there's a good chance you'd probably be able to play those games through that and get that experience. Granted, your internet has to be fast enough, but it is an option. It does allow you to have that in your hands, and it puts PC games in your hands that wouldn't be there normally.
Yeah, I think it's nice it's a nice option. I'm glad that they're doing like a native app, whether that's like installed from the website or whether you install that from Steam. I'm not sure what approach they're going to go with it, but I'd love to see this also happen for other services. Like I'm surprised we've not seen Xbox do something like this, especially considering, that's a premium add-on now. To get the streaming, you've got to be on the ultimate subscription. Why not have like a native app that you can install through Steam on any device, and you can just stream your games directly from the cloud, especially considering Microsoft also now has made it that you can stream games you bought. It doesn't necessarily just have to be games that are available on Game Pass.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something I guess like we'll just have to see like what the rollout on that is, because I know it's not every game. It's like a pre-set list of games that have, that are able to take advantage of that feature. But I imagine the long-term goal is probably that like every game will be able to take advantage of that as they, develop the technology and set up more, I guess it's technically a server, right? More machines, right? That can run the programming. That can do the legwork.
Massive server racks, just all.
The PlayStation still have their like service, streaming only service that they used to have that you could install the PC app.
What was the name of that company they bought?
What, PS Now?
Yeah, PS Now. Is that
PS
still
Now.
around?
They made it better recently
when they redid the PlayStation.
Yeah, PS Plus, and now so the game streaming, the PS Portal was recently updated to, not just be streamed from your console, but also stream from the cloud. So
so now you can use that like on the road for a large number of games as well, which is pretty cool.
It's very cool. Yeah.
So yeah,
but
I
mean, that was
one of those things where, like, in the next
solution.
10 years, that might be like a standard thing. Like that technology has definitely come a long way in the last 5 years or whatever since Game Pass started making it available, and it was terrible at launch. And it's definitely a lot better now. So I mean, the idea that like streaming games to devices might be a bigger segment of how people get games in the next couple of years is certainly possible. I think the barrier has always been the technology and like internet infrastructure, and both of those things have come some way. I think it's always just the thing of like streaming is so ubiquitous in every other medium, and I think that like video games, maybe not always, but for the foreseeable future will struggle with that just because of how much data you have to move and how much like latency is an issue. And like, if you're watching something on Netflix and like your internet dips for a second and you have like one scene where it gets pixelated, you're like, okay, whatever, right? But like if you're in the middle of an online game and that happens and then you lose a ranked game, you're going to be pissed, right? Or like you're in the middle of a boss fight and then it fucks up and you lose and then you lose all the progress you made. You're going to be pissed. And it's a substandard experience. And I think that particularly PC gamers, right, accept a substandard experience. I didn't build a $2,000 rig for a substandard experience, right? Like, and I think that's kind of the uphill battle that these things have to deal with. But like, I mean, 6 years ago, right, when they first put it out, it was what a fun idea, and now it's like,
I remember the first thing I ever tried, and it was before Stadia, and it was you could play Assassin's Creed Origins
in the browser
in Chrome.
I remember,
and it was like just connect your controller, and it was like, oh, this is so cool. That I was like playing a game, and it was like, oh, you can just play this for free, and it was awesome. Obviously, Stadia died. If they'd have launched that a little bit later, and they'd have like got the business model figured out where you either played games that you already owned on Steam, or it was just subscription only, and you got games included in the price.
They just should have never gotten into video. It's just like these big companies are not willing to eat shit long enough to be in video games, and that's the problem. It's like, look at Xbox, right? Like literally there was that report earlier today that it's like if they didn't acquire Activision Blizzard, they were going to be pressured to shut Xbox down, and that's Microsoft, right? It's like, yeah, dude, it's like you gotta be willing to spend hundreds of millions of billions of dollars to really get in the fucking video game industry.
Phil Spencer has been either the middle or the back of a human centipede for the last like few years. Just absolutely like a train of shit going through him.
Yeah.
And he's still smiling because he's still, that's what you need to do, because there is still money to be made. There are going to be bad times. And we've said this before about games wanting to be Fortnite at launch. They want to be as good as Fortnite at launch. That just can't happen. Google just couldn't. They're not patient enough with this sort of shit.
Fortnite wasn't even Fortnite at launch. It's
exactly.
Like, it's like, dude, like you can't. These kinds of things don't happen overnight, and that's why, to your point, Steve, like Microsoft is like obviously the candidate to get something like this across because they have the amount of resources to eat shit for several years and develop the technology. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if they end up throwing their hat in the ring, and if like any of these competitors can like really, eke out a meaningful segment of this market, or like even like what this market will look like in a couple years. Like, are devices like the Steam Deck a lot more popular in 5 years, or have all of these other pretenders kind of fucked off because there really wasn't that much money to be made, and Steam Deck will still be here because it's a gateway to a marketplace, and that's really how they make their money, is not hardware, it's getting you in the Steam ecosystem.
Yeah.
And it's obviously an incredibly powerful tool for getting people into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I know so many people who had never touched PC games ever, maybe owned like one game on, or maybe owned like one game on Steam. and they bought a Steam Deck and they love it, and they've bought so many games and they've really got into it because there's just so many games on PC that never make it to console because maybe they can't afford a publishing license, or they come to PC first because it's easier to develop for and just push it out. There's just so much more choice there.
We had Ben on this show who, when he bought his Steam Deck, he had 2 games in his library. Now he has like 106 or something stupid like that, and that's
to mention with like library sharing and everything. Like, that's like such a, it's, the value of the Steam ecosystem is like nobody's confused about that, right? Like, I think if you're a console gamer, even if you are not a PC person, you're probably peering over the fence at the Steam summer sale and being like, sure would be nice to take advantage of this, or when that hot indie game that you're looking forward to is out on PC and you need to wait a year and a half before it comes to Switch, right? It's like, so it's, I think Valve clearly like was onto something with the Steam Deck, and I think that's why you're seeing all these people make a play, and it's just a matter of if anybody can become the Pepsi to their Coke, right? And that I think is the big question, is like, is there room for a Pepsi in this marketplace? And
Pepsi's better, so maybe someone will come in and be better than Coke.
People like you are the reason that we have choice, I guess. So not my fault your taste buds don't work. That's next you're gonna tell me you like Crystal Pepsi.
I don't like Crystal Pepsi, but we got Pepsi Electric last year, and it was disgusting. Hated Pepsi Electric.
I have no idea what that is.
I drank it, and it was bright blue.
Yeah.
And I thought it was going to taste like Pepsi, but it wasn't.
It's like lemonade, isn't it?
Like Mountain Dew Voltage?
It basically is that. It was lemon and lime. Pepsi Electric, they called it here.
It was cheap. It tricked me. I felt misled.
Okay. I felt betrayed.
Wow. Strong words.
Before we wrap up, Max, I want to touch on why Phil Spencer's probably still smiling, because I just checked the Microsoft stock. It's gone up 5 times in value in the last 5 years.
Really?
So Phil is probably swimming in cash. So no matter how Xbox does, Phil's okay.
And the gamers will shit, and he'll get a massive one of those big novelty spoons, and he'll.
All right, that's it. We're gonna wrap it up there for the day. Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the Steam Deck Podcast. Remember, if you want to get involved with the show, you want to write in, get your thoughts right on the air, you want to check out our sister shows, Nintendo Noise and the Flip Screen Games Podcast. You can find all that and much more by heading over to flipscreen.games. And of course, I want to remind you that this episode of the Steam Deck Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of January. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Susan Still Likes Cats and also Boobies, Ty the Dude, Voodoo Vic, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/flipscreengames. Y'all the realest of the real, and we could not do this show without your support. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you. However you choose to get the show, however you choose to be involved in the community, thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. We're looking forward to a fun 2025. We'll see you next week.